The planet Kareth-7 wanted everything dead. This was not poetry or exaggeration. The Galactic Union had classified it as an Omega survivable world, which meant that survival was technically possible, but practically a joke. The air was poison. The water was acid. The jungle glowed with colors that hurt the eyes. And everything that moved in those jungles had evolved to kill. Commander Salith of the Volanthi Scientific Corps stood at the observation window of their forward base and watched the storm approaching. Lightning the color of infected wounds split the sky. The trees bent and screamed in the wind. Behind her, 12 Volanthi researchers hurried to secure equipment, their forearms moving in nervous patterns. 4 Kron security officers checked their weapons for the 100th time. And 1 human sat in the corner, eating something from a small container with a metal tool. Marcus Cole was the expedition's environmental consultant. He was not particularly tall for a human. He was not particularly strong. He had brown hair that was going gray at the edges, and eyes that watched everything with quiet attention. The Volanthi had not wanted him on this mission. Humans made them nervous. But the Union had insisted because humans had a strange talent for noticing things that other species missed. "The storm will reach us in 40 minutes, announced Dr. Kethra, the lead xenobiologist. Her voice carried the musical tones of her species, but there was no music in her words now. Only fear. We must evacuate to the secondary base. Salith nodded. The secondary base was 50 kilometers east, built on higher ground. They had always known Kareth-7 would try to kill them. That was why they had backup plans for their backup plans. Everyone to the transport pods, Salith ordered. Standard evacuation protocol. Move quickly, but do not panic. Marcus closed his food container and stood. He moved without hurry, checking his respirator mask and the small pack he always carried. The Kron security chief, a massive creature named Vorith, watched him with what might have been confusion. "Human," Vorith said. "You do not seem afraid." Marcus looked at the storm through the window. "I've seen bad weather before. This is not weather. This is Kareth-7 trying to digest us." "Same thing," Marcus said, and walked toward the transport pods. The evacuation began smoothly. The Volanthi were excellent at protocols and procedures. They loaded equipment and personnel into the 6 transport pods with practiced efficiency. Marcus was assigned to Pod 4 with 3 Volanthi researchers and 1 Kron guard. The storm hit faster than the sensors had predicted. The first lightning strike destroyed Pod 6 before it could launch. The explosion lit up the base like a second sun. Salith screamed orders into her communicator, telling everyone to launch immediately. Forget the protocols. Just go. Pod 4 rose into the howling wind. Marcus gripped his seat restraints and watched the jungle spin beneath them. The pilot, a young Volanthi named Cerise, fought with the controls. Rain that could melt metal hammered against the hull. Lightning danced around them like hungry predators. Then the ground opened up. Later, the other survivors would describe it as a sinkhole, a geological feature common on Kareth-7, where underground rivers of acid carved hollow spaces beneath the surface. When the storm dumped enough water, these spaces collapsed. It was simple science. It was also a death sentence. Pod 4 was directly above the sinkhole when it opened. Marcus felt the world drop away. The pod's engine screamed as Cerise tried to climb, but the suction was too strong. They were falling into darkness, into a hole that seemed to have no bottom. The Volanthi researchers were making sounds of terror. The Kron guard was praying to gods Marcus had never heard of. Then something hit them from the side. Another piece of debris, or perhaps a chunk of falling earth. The pod cracked open like an egg. Marcus was thrown into the darkness. He remembered falling. He remembered hitting water that burned even through his protective suit. He remembered swimming toward a light that might have been real, or might have been his dying brain inventing comfort. He remembered crawling onto solid ground and lying there, breathing through a mask that was cracked and leaking. Then he remembered nothing at all. Above, in the chaos of the storm, Commander Salith received the final transmission from Pod 4. It was just static and screaming. Then silence. When the storm passed 18 hours later, she sent drones to investigate. They found the sinkhole, now filled with churning water and debris. They found pieces of Pod 4 scattered across a half-kilometer radius. They found 3 bodies. They did not find Marcus Cole. The human fell into the breathing depths, Dr. Kethra reported, her voice hollow. No one survives the breathing depths. The breathing depths was what the Union called the subterranean jungle ecosystem beneath Karath 7's surface. It was worse than the surface, which was already terrible. The predators were larger. The plants were more toxic. The darkness was absolute, except for the bioluminescent glow of things that wanted to eat you. The longest any sapient being had survived in the breathing depths was 6 standard hours. That record was held by a Kron warrior who had been specifically trained for hostile environments and equipped with the best survival gear the Union could provide. Marcus Cole had fallen wearing a cracked respirator and carrying a small pack with basic supplies. Commander Salith performed a volante death rites that evening. She spoke the words that released a soul to the cosmic flow. She recorded Marcus Cole's death in the official expedition log. She sent a message to the human government expressing condolences for their loss. "It is unfortunate," she said to Dr. Kethra afterward. The human was quiet, but he was not unpleasant. "They are a strange species," Kethra agreed. "So fragile, yet they insist on going everywhere. Perhaps this will teach them to respect the galaxy's dangers." Salith made a sound of agreement. The matter was closed. Marcus Cole was dead. The expedition would continue its work. Korath 7 had claimed another victim, as it always did. 3 weeks later, the perimeter sensors detected movement. It was night, which on Korath 7 meant the jungle's glow shifted from blue-green to deep purple. The security officer monitoring the sensors frowned at his screen. Something was at the edge of their cleared zone. Something large enough to trigger the motion detectors, but not matching any known predator profile. He adjusted the cameras and felt his 4 hearts stop beating for a moment. There was a figure at the tree line. It stood on 2 legs. It was wrapped in something dark and rough, like animal hide. Its face was hidden behind a mask made from bone, but its shape was wrong for any native creature. Its shape was human. The figure stood there for a long moment, watching the base. Then it turned and vanished into the glowing jungle. The security officer ran to wake Commander Salith. Behind him, unnoticed, the sensors detected something else. A message scratched into the mud at the clearing's edge. 3 words in Universal Standard, the common language of the Galactic Union. The words said, "Still not dead." Dr. Kethra had not slept properly in 2 months. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the figure at the tree line. The bone mask. The impossible shape. The words scratched into the mud. The other expedition members had convinced themselves it was a trick of the light. A predator that happened to stand upright. A malfunction in the sensors. Commander Salith had officially logged it as unexplained wildlife activity and ordered everyone to focus on their work. But Kethra could not focus. She was a xenobiologist. Her entire career was built on observing and understanding life forms. And she knew with absolute certainty that what she had seen was not wildlife. It was Marcus Cole. The dead human was alive. She began spending her nights at the sensor station, watching the perimeter cameras. She requested permission to examine the areas where the sighting had occurred. Commander Salith refused, citing safety protocols. Kethra went anyway, sneaking out before dawn when the predators were least active. She found nothing the first 3 times. The 4th time, she found a footprint dot. It was pressed into the soft ground near a stream. A boot print, human-sized. The pattern on the bottom was standard Union issue, the kind of boot every expedition member had been given. Cathra took photographs and measurements. Her hands were shaking. "This proves nothing," Marath, the Kron security chief, said when she showed him. "The boot could have been lost during the crash. An animal could have stepped on it." "An animal stepped on a boot and left a perfect footprint?" Cathra asked. "Strange things happen on death worlds. This is not a strange thing. This is a human being alive when he should be dead." Morath made a rumbling sound in his chest. Among his species, it meant discomfort. "The breathing depths kill everything, Doctor. This is not opinion. This is fact. 6 hours is the survival record. Your human has been down there for 2 months. Then explain the footprint." "I cannot explain the footprint. But I can tell you that hoping for impossible things leads only to pain." Cathra stopped arguing. She could see that logic would not work here. The aliens around her had already decided what was possible and what was not. They would not change their minds because of evidence. They would only change their minds if the impossible walked up and introduced itself. So she waited. And she watched. And she kept finding things. A week after the footprint, a patrol team discovered 3 dead predators near the eastern perimeter. They were Karath stalkers, medium-sized hunters known for their speed and their poison claws. Something had killed all 3 of them. The wounds were clean and precise, made by a sharp edge rather than tooth or claw. No native creature used tools. "Perhaps they fought each other," suggested one of the Volanti researchers. "They are pack hunters," Cathra replied. "They do not fight their own kind. And look at these wounds. They are identical. Same angle. Same depth. Whatever killed them did it the same way each time. That suggests learning, practice, intelligence." Commander Salith examined the bodies and said nothing for a long time. Then she ordered them burned and told everyone to increase security patrols. The discoveries continued. A supply cache from the crash pod 4 was found, broken open and emptied. But only certain items were missing: water purification tablets, medical supplies, wire and cord, things that would be useless to an animal, but very useful to someone trying to survive. Then they found the shelter dot. It was built in a cave 3 kilometers from the base, hidden behind a waterfall of acidic water. The cave mouth was narrow, barely wide enough for a human to squeeze through. Inside, someone had created a living space. The walls were lined with the pelts of predators, providing insulation against the cold. A fire pit sat in the center, surrounded by stones. Bones were stacked neatly in one corner, sorted by size. And on the back wall, scratched deep into the rock, were words. Day 47. Still here. Cathra stood in that cave and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Wonder. Pure and absolute wonder. "He's alive," she whispered. "He's been alive this whole time." She began researching humans that night. She accessed every database the Union had, reading everything she could find about this strange species from a small planet called Earth. What she found disturbed her in ways she had not expected. Humans were not special. Their bodies were weak compared to most sapient species. They could not see in the dark. They could not breathe underwater. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no poison. By every biological measure, they should have gone extinct long before they developed technology. But they had not gone extinct. They had spread across their world and then beyond it. They had colonized environments that should have killed them. Deserts, frozen wastelands, the bottom of their oceans, the void of space itself. The record showed a pattern that made Kethra's scales itch with unease. Whenever someone told humans that something was impossible, they seemed to take it as a challenge. Their history was filled with moments where they had done what could not be done, survived what could not be survived, conquered what could not be conquered. They had a word for it in their oldest language. The word translated roughly as stubborn, but that translation missed something. It was not just refusal to give up. It was refusal to accept that giving up was even an option. Kethra was still reading when the alarm went off. She ran to the communication center, where Commander Salith and the others had already gathered. The main screen showed a signal detection. Something was broadcasting from deep in the breathing depths, using a frequency that had not been used in centuries. "What is that?" Salith demanded. "It appears to be a pattern," the communications officer said. "Short signals and long signals in a specific sequence. I do not recognize the encoding." Kethra recognized it. She had just read about it in the human history files. "It is called Morse code," she said quietly. Humans used it before they developed faster communication technology. Each pattern of short and long signals represents a letter. "Can you translate it?" Kethra moved to the console and began working. The pattern repeated 3 times before she had it fully decoded. When she read the message aloud, her voice was steady, but her hearts were racing. It says, "Don't send rescue. Send witnesses." Silence filled the room. Every alien looked at each other, trying to understand what they were hearing. "Witnesses to what?" Commander Salith asked. Kethra thought about the footprints. The dead predators. The shelter made from the skins of creatures that were supposed to be unkillable. She thought about a human falling into the most dangerous place on one of the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy, and not only surviving but thriving. "I believe," she said slowly. "He wants us to watch what he is about to do." The signal continued broadcasting through the night. The same message over and over. A dead man speaking from the depths of hell, telling the galaxy to pay attention. Doctor. Kethra did not sleep that night either. But for the first time in 2 months, it was not fear keeping her awake, it was anticipation. Marcus Cole woke before dawn, as he always did now. His body had learned the rhythms of this place, the cycles of light and darkness that governed when the predators hunted and when they slept. He lay still for a moment, listening to the sounds of the cave around him. Water dripping, wind moving through distant tunnels, the slow breathing of something large sleeping nearby. He sat up and looked at the creature curled against the far wall. It was a juvenile Karathmor, roughly the size of a small car. Its scales were dark purple, almost black, and its 6 legs were tucked beneath its body. When it sensed his movement, one eye opened and watched him. Then it closed again and went back to sleep. "Good morning to you too," Marcus said. 63 days. He had been down here for 63 days. He knew this because he scratched a mark into the wall each morning, a habit he had developed to keep his mind anchored to reality. Without some way to track time, he thought he might go mad. The first week had been the worst. He had woken up on a rocky shore, half drowned and burned by the acidic water. His respirator was cracked, leaking the poison atmosphere into his lungs with every breath. He had crawled into the first shelter he could find, a gap between 2 boulders, and spent 3 days coughing up blood and waiting to die. But he had not died. Humans were stubborn that way. On the 4th day, he had started moving. Not because he had a plan, but because staying still meant giving up. And Marcus Cole did not know how to give up. He had grown up in a place called Alaska on Earth, where the winters could kill you in hours if you made mistakes. His father had taught him to hunt and fish and build shelters from nothing. His mother had taught him to never stop thinking, never stop adapting, never stop looking for solutions. Those lessons had saved his life. more times than he could count in the past 63 days. He had learned quickly that the breathing depths operated on simple rules. Everything here was trying to eat everything else. The predators were efficient and brutal, but they were not intelligent. They followed patterns. They had weaknesses, and a human who watched carefully could learn those patterns and exploit those weaknesses. The first predator he killed was a Karath stalker that had cornered him in a dead-end tunnel. He had used a sharpened piece of metal from his crash pod, driving it into the soft spot behind the creature's skull. It had taken him 3 hours to butcher the body, and another 2 to figure out which parts were safe to eat. That night, he had slept with a full stomach for the first time since the crash. After that, things became easier. Not easy, but easier. He learned which plants could be processed into medicine. He learned which fungi could be burned for light and heat. He learned how to move through the tunnels without attracting attention, how to mask his scent with the musk of dead predators, how to read the bioluminescent patterns that warned of danger, and he learned how to hunt. Marcus stood now and walked to the back of his cave, where he kept his trophies. 17 skulls lined the wall, arranged by size. Each one represented a different species of apex predator. Each one had been declared unkillable by the Galactic Union's official surveys. Each one had learned that the surveys were wrong. The largest skull belonged to a Karath Maw, the mother of the juvenile sleeping against the wall. She had been the most dangerous thing Marcus had ever faced. A creature of pure killing instinct wrapped in armor that could deflect plasma fire. The fight had lasted 6 hours. Marcus had used traps, poison, fire, and finally a spear made from her own bone to bring her down. The juvenile had watched the whole thing. Wayne's mother fell, and it approached Marcus slowly, head low, making sounds that he eventually understood as submission. In the brutal logic of Karath 7, Marcus had proven himself the stronger predator. The juvenile had attached itself to him and refused to leave. He called it Ghost, because it moved without sound. Marcus ate a quick breakfast of dried meat and fungal paste, then gathered his equipment. Today was important. Today he would send his message and begin his journey back to the surface. The Morse code beacon he had built from salvaged electronics had been broadcasting for 3 days now. If the expedition was still there, they would have received it. He wanted witnesses because he wanted the galaxy to understand something. The Galactic Union had built their civilization on categories and classifications. They had decided which worlds were survivable and which were not. They had decided which species were capable and which were limited. They had looked at humans and seen soft bodies and short lifespans and classified them as fragile. They were wrong. Marcus moved through the tunnels with Ghost padding silently behind him. He knew these passages now, knew them better than he had ever known any place on Earth. The breathing depths had tried to kill him every day for 63 days, and every day he had refused to die. Now these tunnels were his home. These predators were his prey. This impossible place had become his kingdom. He reached the surface access point as the light above began to shift from purple to blue-green. Dawn on Karath 7, the most dangerous time, when the nocturnal hunters were returning to their dens and the diurnal hunters were waking up. The perfect time for something unexpected. Marcus checked his equipment one final time. His armor was made from predator hide, layered and treated to resist the acidic rain. His weapons were bone and metal, sharp and tested. His face was covered by a mask carved from the skull of the first Karath stalker he had killed. Because intimidation was a tool like any other. Ghost pressed against his leg, sensing his tension. 3 days, Marcus told the creature. 3 days to reach the base. Stay close and stay quiet. He had mapped the route already during weeks of careful exploration. He knew where the dangers were and how to avoid them. He knew where to rest and where to run. He also knew that no plan survived contact with Korath 7, so he had backup plans for every backup plan. The journey would be difficult, possibly deadly. But Marcus had stopped believing in impossible things 63 days ago, when he had crawled out of acidic water with cracked ribs and a failing respirator and decided that this planet would not be his grave. He had fallen into the breathing depths as a consultant, a quiet man who took notes and deferred to alien expertise. That man was gone now, burned away by acid and hunger and the constant pressure of survival. The thing that climbed toward the surface was something else entirely. Before he left the tunnels, Marcus paused at a flat rock near the entrance. He pulled out his knife and carved 3 words into the stone, adding to the trail of messages he had left throughout the breathing depths. A record of his journey, a testament to human stubbornness. The word said, "Humans don't quit." Then Marcus Cole, the dead man who refused to die, began his walk home. Behind him, Ghost followed in silence, and the breathing depths watched them go with something that might have been respect. Commander Salith had not wanted to believe it. Even after the Morse code message, even after the footprints and the dead predators and the shelter with its scratched walls, she had clung to the comfort of impossibility. Humans could not survive the breathing depths. This was established fact. This was the foundation upon which the Galactic Union built its understanding of dangerous worlds. But now a ship had arrived from Union headquarters, carrying officials and diplomats and people with titles she had never heard of. They had come because word had spread, because someone had leaked the reports, because the galaxy was suddenly very interested in the dead human who kept leaving messages. "You understand the implications," said Ambassador Kethros, a senior Volanti whose scales had faded to gray with age. "If this human has truly survived for over 2 months in a place where survival is considered impossible, it raises questions about every classification we have ever made." "I understand," Salith replied. "Do you?" "The Union has classified over 4,000 worlds as unsurvivable. Our colonial policies are based on these classifications. Our treaties with younger species are based on our expertise in determining what is and is not possible. If one human can make fools of us on Korath 7, what else have we been wrong about?" Salith had no answer for that. The Tethra stood at the perimeter fence, ignoring the political discussions happening behind her. She had a scanner in her hands and her eyes fixed on the tree line. 3 days, the message had said. 3 days since it was sent. If the human was coming, he should arrive soon. The Kron security team had doubled their patrols. Morath himself stood nearby, his massive frame tense with anticipation. He had stopped dismissing the possibility of survival. Now he seemed almost eager, as if he wanted to see this impossible thing with his own eyes. "What do you think he will be like?" Kethra asked him. Vareth considered the question. "Changed," he said finally. "The breathing depths change everything they touch. Whatever comes out of that jungle will not be the same man who fell in. That frightens you. It should frighten everyone." Dawn came slowly, the sky shifting through its alien colors. The jungle glowed and pulsed with bioluminescent life. Predator calls echoed in the distance, the sounds of hunting and dying that never stopped on Korath-7. Then Kethra's scanner beeped. "Movement," she announced, her voice carrying across the compound. "Something is approaching from the southeast." Everyone turned. Ambassador Kethros and his officials emerged from the main building. Security officers raised their weapons. Recording drones lifted into the air, because the Union wanted documentation of whatever was about to happen. The jungle at the tree line began to shake. Something was pushing through the undergrowth, something large and powerful. The bioluminescent plants thinned as it passed, as if even they were afraid. Then Marcus Cole stepped into the light. He did not look human anymore. That was Kethra's first thought. He was wrapped in the hide of creatures that should not be wrappable. layers of scaled skin and dark fur forming armor that covered him from neck to foot. His face was hidden behind a mask made from bone, carved into the shape of a snarling predator. His hands held weapons of sharpened bone and salvaged metal. Scars covered every visible inch of his skin, but his eyes were the same, quiet, watchful, human dot behind him. Something else emerged from the jungle. The Kron security team immediately raised their weapons. Vorath shouted orders. The creature was a Kureth Maw, the apex predator of Kureth 7, a thing that hunting parties had died trying to kill. It was young, but still massive, its 6 legs carrying it with terrible grace. "Hold your fire!" Cathara screamed. The Maw stopped beside Marcus and sat down. It looked at the gathered aliens with cold intelligence, but it made no move to attack. It was waiting, following, obeying. Marcus removed his mask. His face was thinner than before, weathered by hardship and exposure. A scar ran from his forehead to his jaw. But he was smiling, a small and tired smile that somehow made everything more unsettling. "Good morning," he said. "I hope I'm not late." Nobody answered. Nobody could find words. Marcus walked forward, and Ghost the Kureth Maw walked with him. The security team parted to let them through, too stunned to do anything else. He stopped in front of Ambassador Kethros, who was staring at him like he was looking at a ghost. "You're dead," Kethros whispered. "I was told that," Marcus agreed. "Several times, actually. By the planet, mostly. It was very insistent." "How? How is this possible?" Marcus looked at the ambassador for a long moment. Then he looked at the officials behind him, at the recording drones, at the expedition members who had declared him dead and performed funeral rites over his empty grave. "You asked the wrong question," he said. "All of you, your whole civilization, you asked the wrong question. You look at a challenge and ask, is this possible? If the answer seems to be no, you stop. You accept the limitation. You build your lives around what you think you cannot do." He gestured at himself, at his armor and weapons and the tame predator at his side. "Humans don't ask if something is possible. We ask how to make it possible. That's the difference. That's why I'm standing here when your classifications say I should be dead." Tethira stepped forward, her scanner forgotten. The breathing depths. "How did you survive?" "By refusing to die. By watching and learning and adapting. By remembering that every impossible thing is just a problem that hasn't been solved yet." Marcus paused. "And by being too stubborn to know when to quit." Ambassador Kethros had recovered some of his composure. "This is remarkable. Unprecedented. The Union will want to study how you did this. Your techniques could be valuable." "They could be," Marcus agreed. "They could change how you think about survivability, about capability, about what species are limited and what species are not." There was something in his voice now, something sharp. Cathara recognized it. It was the same tone she had heard from humans in historical records, the tone they used when they were about to make a point that others would not like. "But here's the thing," Marcus continued. "You were wrong about this planet. You were wrong about humans. And I think you're wrong about a lot of other things, too. So I have a suggestion." "What suggestion?" Marcus smiled again, and this time there was no tiredness in it. "Only certainty. Stop telling the galaxy what's impossible, because somebody might decide to prove you wrong." He turned and walked toward the expedition's medical facility, Ghost padding behind him. He needed rest and proper food and treatment for wounds that had been healing badly for weeks. But he had made his point. The recording drones had captured everything. The message would spread. Behind him, Ambassador Kethros stood in silence, thinking about 4,000 worlds that the Union had declared unsurvivable, thinking about a species that looked at the word impossible and saw only a challenge, thinking about what would happen when humans learned. that there were 4,000 new frontiers waiting to be conquered. Dr. Kethra watched Marcus disappear into the medical building. She understood now why her species found humans unsettling. It was not their bodies or their technology or their rapid expansion through the galaxy. It was their refusal to accept limits. And that, she realized, was the most dangerous thing in the universe. 1 year later, the colony ship touched down on Karath-7. It carried 300 humans. Farmers, engineers, doctors, builders, families with children, old people who had seen Earth's oceans and young people who had only known the stars. They stepped off the ship into the glowing jungle air, breathing through filters that Marcus Cole had helped design. And they looked at the world that the galaxy had declared UNSURVIVABLE. Then they started building. The colony was called Cole's Landing over Marcus's objections. He had argued that he was not special, that any human would have done what he did, that naming things after him made him uncomfortable. The colonists had ignored him. Heroes needed names, they said, and Marcus Cole had become more than a name. He had become a symbol. The story had spread through every corner of the Galactic Union. The human who fell into hell and walked out wearing its skin. The consultant who became a hunter. The dead man who sent a message saying, "Witnesses wanted," and then emerged from the jungle with a tamed apex predator at his side. The Union had tried to control the narrative. They had released official statements explaining that Marcus Cole's survival was an extreme outlier, a combination of luck and unusual circumstances that could not be replicated. They had reassured their member species that the classifications remained valid. The death worlds were still deadly. That humans were not as dangerous as this one incident suggested. Nobody believed them. The requests had started within weeks. Human colonial offices receiving applications for settlement rights on worlds that had been marked unsurvivable. Worlds with toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures, hostile wildlife. Worlds that the Union had written off as useless. The first request was for Karath-7 itself. The Union had debated for months. They had cited regulations and safety concerns and the obvious impossibility of establishing permanent habitation on an omega survivable world. But the humans have been patient and persistent and very, very stubborn. Eventually, the Union had agreed, partly because they could not find legal grounds to refuse, partly because they were curious to see what would happen, and partly because they had learned over the past year that telling humans no often just made them more determined. Marcus stood on a hill overlooking the construction site, watching the colonists work. They had already cleared a perimeter and established defensive walls. They were building homes and planting crops and setting up the infrastructure that would let them survive on a world designed to kill them. Ghost lay beside him, grown now to full adult size. The Karath Maw had become famous in its own right, proof that even the deadliest predators could be understood and adapted to. Other colonists had started trying to form similar bonds with the planet's wildlife, with mixed results. But they kept trying. That was the human way. "You seem thoughtful today." Marcus turned to see Dr. Kethra approaching. She had left the original expedition months ago, but she had returned with the colony ship. She wanted to study what the humans were doing here, she said. She wanted to understand. "Just remembering," Marcus said. "1 year ago, I was dying in a cave, trying to figure out how to not die. Now there's a city being built on my grave. Does that bother you?" "No, it makes me proud." He paused, and a little scared, honestly. Scared of what? Marcus gestured at the colony, at the humans swarming over the landscape like ants building a new nest. "I did what I did because I had no choice. Survive or die. But these people chose this. They looked at a death world and said, yes, that's where we want to raise our children. That takes something more than stubbornness. That takes something I don't have a word for. Cathera considered this. Over the past year, she had come to know Marcus well. He was quieter than his legend suggested, more thoughtful, more prone to doubt. He did not see himself as extraordinary. He saw himself as a normal human who had been placed in extraordinary circumstances. That, she had realized, was exactly what made him extraordinary. "I have been studying your species," she said, "trying to understand why you are the way you are. I think I may have found an answer." "What's that?" "Your world, Earth. It is not a death world, but it is not gentle either. It has deserts and frozen wastelands and oceans that can swallow ships whole. It has predators and diseases and natural disasters. Your species evolved in a constant struggle against environment, against each other, against the limitations of your own biology." She paused, choosing her words carefully. Other species, when they achieved sapience, found ways to make their world safe. They eliminated threats. They controlled their environments. They became comfortable. But humans never became comfortable. You kept struggling, kept adapting, kept refusing to accept that anything was truly impossible. That struggle is written into your genetics, your culture, your very way of thinking. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You make us sound like we're broken." "No, I make you sound like you are unfinished. Like you are still evolving, still becoming something new. The rest of us stopped growing a long time ago. We defined our limits and stayed within them. But you have no limits. Only challenges you haven't overcome yet." She looked at the colony below, at the impossible city rising on an impossible world. "That is why the Union fears you. Not because you are strong or violent or aggressive, but because you do not know how to stop. You look at the word impossible and see only an invitation." Marcus thought about this as the sun began to set, painting the alien sky in colors that Earth had never known. He thought about his 63 days in the breathing depths, about the things he had learned and the creature he had become. He thought about the 4,000 death worlds waiting out there in the galaxy, and the humans who were already making plans to claim them. A young colonist approached, a girl no older than 12. She was carrying a datapad and looking at Marcus with the wide eyes of someone meeting a legend. "Mr. Cole? I'm doing a report for my school back home. Can I ask you a question?" Marcus smiled. "Sure. What did you think about during those 63 days? When you were alone down there, trying to survive?" It was the same question people always asked. Marcus had given many different answers over the past year, depending on his mood and the audience. But looking at this girl, at the future of humanity standing on a world that should have been their grave, he decided to tell the truth. "I thought about every time someone told humanity we couldn't," he said. "Couldn't leave our caves. Couldn't cross the oceans. Couldn't reach the stars. Every time, throughout our whole history, someone said, 'This is impossible,' and someone else said, 'Watch me.'" He gestured at the jungle beyond the walls. "Still glowing, still deadly, still magnificent. We're not special because we're stronger or smarter than everyone else. We're special because we look at the impossible and say, 'Not yet,' because we don't have a word for quit. Because when the universe tells us we can't do something, we take it as a challenge." The girl wrote furiously on her datapad. Marcus watched her, then looked up at the darkening sky, where the stars were beginning to appear. Somewhere out there, 4,000 death worlds waited. 4,000 challenges. 4,000 opportunities for humanity to prove, once again, that they did not accept the word impossible. "We're coming," he whispered to those distant worlds. "All of us. We're coming." And across the galaxy, on worlds of fire and ice and poison, the impossible waited to be conquered, because that was what humans did. That was who humans were. and the universe would just have to learn to live with it.